Yancey just came in and left.
Yeah.
So he's in and
I
out.
think he was running in to grab some pledge cards. Well, good morning, and I'm officially recording, so we'll go ahead and get started. We just watched a simple promo video on YouTube about the the way of love from the Episcopal Church, and so if you want to Google that. Well, good morning, and I wanted to start. I felt like I turned on the fire hose last week, and then we had to finish. But are there any residual questions that came up for you from last week that we didn't get to answer or go through? No?
Nope.
Everybody good? Cool. Well, just to do that simple recap, we talked about the way of love. I also gave you Richmond Hill's 12 steps, which is more Benedictine in its approach, and that goes out back to the Rule of St. Benedict. If you want to read the Rule of St. Benedict, he wrote a book several hundred years ago. You can read that. It's great. The other thing we talked about was when we talk about the Lord's Prayer, our prayers include adoration and confession and thanksgiving and supplication. That's a good model. And if you just walk through the Lord's Prayer, you'll see that there is adoration and there's confession and thanksgiving. And then asking, give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses. That's kind of confession and thanksgiving at the same time, or supplication at the same time. And then we started talking about the difference between shotgun goals and sharpshooter goals. And that so often, when we set goals for ourselves, too often it's this. Think of your New Year's resolution, I'm going to lose weight. That's a shotgun goal. And the reason why we don't do it is, I'm going to go to the gym more. You can't quantify, it's near impossible to quantify more, So how can we turn these broad goals into something that we can count, something concrete, something that's quantifiable? If it's not quantifiable, it's not a good goal. Another thing you can Google, I won't have time to get into it today, but SMART goals, that acronym SMART, just Google, capitalize SMART, and look up SMART goals, and it breaks it down. And that talks very clearly about how to do quantifiable goals. And so those are all good places to start. So today on the handout that we made for this week, we have the Rule of Life from Richmond Hill. We didn't go into the details. You have the details on the handout from last week. But it just gives the different areas that they've committed to working on in their community. And everybody who comes into the community agrees to this Rule of Life. The Way of Love has slightly different categories. You can see that a lot of the things on the left fit into the categories on the right. And the other thing that we talked about is some resources for you about how to do the daily office. That came up. And if you put into your phone dailyoffice.app, like in the browser on your smartphone, what it goes to is it goes to a website, and then there's 3 little dots in the right-hand corner, and it says add link to your home page. If you do that, it downloads the app. It's a way to bypass the Apple Store, and that way they don't have to charge anybody anything for it, and they don't have to get approval because it updates daily. But just type in dailyoffice.app, and that is a great place to go.
And then go to what?
There's 3 little dots in the top right-hand corner of it.
Go to which one?
For the dailyoffice.app.
Okay. Then you said we needed to choose something.
Right, it says, and it will ask, do you want to download it to your phone?
Okay.
Or it actually is, do you want to add a link to your home screen?
Okay.
On the Apple phone, that's the way it works. I've never done it on an Android, but I hear it's similar. But that's a way to add the app. And they do a fantastic job on that.
They really do. I downloaded it, got it right here on my phone. Every morning, it's the first thing I do, and I'm already feeling a difference in my life. I will say I skipped along, I do the family version, the shorter version. I tried, the first day I did the whole thing, and it took me a minute, because you gotta, find this, jubilati, you gotta find all the different stuff in the prayer book. So,
Right.
next morning, I just did the family version, and, I think I got more out of the family version because I wasn't concentrating on what page something was on, and anyway, I love it, I really do.
And the people who put out dailyoffice.app are an order in the Episcopal Church called the Gregorians, for St. Gregory, not Gory, but Gregorians, and they do a fantastic job. The Gregorians are known for proclaiming the gospel. That's what they're known for, and this is a great way for them to do it. As I mentioned, I'm part of the Franciscans. I'm going to talk about my rule of life that I do with the Franciscans in just a little bit. And it's more structured. And so, like we have been talking about, we're doing this because anybody can do a rule of life on their own. And I hope that if you do this, you'll find a spiritual director so that they can help you with it. It's like a personal coach in the business world, or a trainer at the gym. That I have a spiritual director. The bishop has a spiritual director. All the folks I know who take this seriously have a spiritual director. Casey's a spiritual director. If you're in relationship with somebody, it's not good to have them as your spiritual director. Does that make sense? So I could be your spiritual director, but it's not the best idea, because I want to be in a different relationship with you. I like my spiritual director. I have no contact with him other than by doing my spiritual direction, which gives us a little more freedom, and it's an autonomous relationship. And he can be a little more honest because he doesn't have to be nice. And then sometimes I need that.
Did you ever know Jay Pace?
No, I didn't. I know Steve real well, but I see Jay's statue at the library.
Yeah, he was my spiritual director.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's really cool.
It looks just like Jay is really sitting there reading the newspaper, actually. I think it's the best statue I've ever seen.
I went down for the Christmas market on Saturday, and there was a girl cuddled up on Jay's lap.
Oh, that's cute.
We came around the corner and saw it, and she was just snuggled up with him. I thought happy thoughts. But I know a lot of people who did know Jay.
Yeah, no, he was an
Knew him
amazing
well.
man, yeah.
So let's see. So I talked about the Gregorians. Like I said, that's the one I use. BCP, that's the Book of Common Prayer online. That has the entire prayer book, and I use it a lot. I copy and paste from BCP online daily. That's the way we do our bulletins. You can pay a service to do your bulletins, and I'm like, why pay when you can do it for free? So I just literally block it and copy and paste it. Whenever I do funerals, that's what I do. I just get the whole service, and we just start marking out the things we, like, as if we were preparing for the funeral this Saturday. I go through and mark through the stuff we don't want to do. And that way, we're making sure we do everything right and get it all in there. But that would have your daily office. It would also have your family devotions that you were talking about. And that's BCP, Book of Common Prayer Online.org. Commonprayer.net is another one, which is a good resource. I've heard people use it. I have not used that one personally, but I've heard good things about it. And if you want to really do some interesting stuff, and this is a little bit longer, churchofengland.org, prayer and worship, join us service for daily prayer. If you go to that website, especially on your phone, they read it to you. So if you're driving in your car and you want to have some prayer time, but you need to keep your eyes on the road, I'm not encouraging multitasking, but we've all been there. We've all had that in our lives, and that's a great way for someone to read the prayers with you while you say them in your head. And that's updated daily. The only thing about the Church of England, their daily readings and for their daily office is slightly different. So we are this is getting a little bit too much in the details, but our lectionary for Sundays, we are part of what is called the Revised Common Lectionary. A lot of people like to joke because they call it the Roman Catholic lectionary because we took most of it from the Roman Catholics, but it also is a way for a lot of churches to be reading the same scripture on the same day. You might have talked to somebody who went to a Presbyterian church or the Methodist church, or First Baptist often uses the lectionary. And they use the RCL, Revised Common Lectionary. 95% of the time, we are the same with everybody else. There are a few weeks where we've made slight changes, and so we aren't necessarily all the time the same. Our daily office is the same way. Our prayer book has certain readings for the daily office, and it goes through a cycle. And the Church of England has different readings. Even though we're both Anglican, they have slightly different readings in their daily office lectionary. So, just so you know, and their readings are longer, usually. They cover more of the Bible than we do. But we can get ours done in 10 minutes. Which they don't even come close. Not that that's important, but some days it is. I think we're just a little more speedy as a nation than they are. So those are all the apps that I wanted to bring up as a way to incorporate that daily cycle of prayer and learning. You know, it's a one-stop shop. You get to do the prayers, you get to do the worship, you get to do the learning all together. Yeah. Any questions on that? Okay. I wanted to talk about the categories for my rule of life. And so if you look at the top at Richmond Hill, like I said, they have their 12, Way of Love has their 7. My rule of life has 9, and these were dictated by my order. Like I said, I'm part of the Franciscan order. I'm about to take my life vows in February, which is going to be really cool. And I get to add letters after my name.
Very good.
One of my things I'm supposed to be is humble, but I'm really excited about it. When I make my life vows, I am able to add the letters TSSF, the Tertiary Society of St. Francis. So we're the third order, tertiary, primary, secondary, tertiary, the third order. So the first order of St. Francis established were the brothers. And the second order were the Poor Clares, the nuns. So we have the monks of the first order, the nuns of the second order. And then the tertiary are folks that are living out in the world that are trying to live out the principles of Francis and keep their life. Yeah. And so it can be lay people or ordained people, so that's why I'm able to do that. And if you're interested in that, we have a chapter that meets here at St. James Less. You know, I don't advertise that a lot. We meet here because I have keys. So it's kind of like, you know, remember the bumper stickers that the Masons used to have to be one, ask one, you know, and so I don't advertise that a lot, but it means a lot to me for the sheer fact of it's a group that helps hold me accountable to my spiritual life. And the 3 vows in being a Franciscan is to live a chaste life, to live a life that is devoted to simplicity. Some people call that poverty, but you know, it's just trying to do it as simply as possible. And then obedience, and it's a way for me to be obedient and intentional. And so these are the categories. And Mary Helen, I'm not sure if you can see my statement. So these are the things I've committed to working on every year. So Eucharist, now as a priest, that's easy. For the people who are the lay members who do this, that's something you have to be a little more intentional about. And they want you to take Eucharist weekly. And yeah, on the occasional weeks where I don't have Eucharist, I do it 2 or 3 other times all the other weeks, so it more balances out. But I try really hard to do Eucharist every week. Penitence, be penitential. If you remember in Indiana Jones, that's why he didn't get his head chopped off, because he remembered to be penitential. You humble yourself before the Lord, and he kneels and the blade goes spinning over his head in Last Crusade. But being penitent, being humble before God. You know, we all have things we need to atone for. We all have sins that we've committed that we have to find a way to help make right. Self-emptying, That is one that, especially in our culture, that's so consumer-driven, is a hard one for me and for most of the other people as we wrestle with it. But often we see this as fasting, but it's more than just food. This goes back to that idea of doing things as simply as possible. What do you really need to have a good life? And often the more we cross off our list, the more we can cross off our list, because you're like, yeah, I don't really need that either. Like I said, I used the example last week of converting to an electric car, and it is a conversion. It's a different way of being. And I have to do things a lot more simply. I can't just run into town without thinking about it. Do I have the charge to do that? If not, how am I going to get my charge? My daughters, I picked them up yesterday after a dentist appointment, and the faster you go, the more energy you use. And so before we could get home, I needed to charge up my car. And I could have gone all the way home and then all the way back. But I said, no, we're going to stop and, we'll grab what few groceries we need to top off our list out of Walmart while we're there at the charging station, and kill two birds with one stone. It makes us be a lot more intentional. And that's what we're talking about in all of this, is how do we live intentionally? How does every action we make be worth doing? When we rest, let's intentionally rest. When we eat, let's intentionally eat. When we have fellowship with one another, how do we do that intentionally? And that's a spiritual discipline. All of this is turning your whole life into an act that you can give to God. How do you, when you're fooling around on Facebook, how do you give glory to God? This month, if you've been noticing the church's Instagram page, if you're on that, we're doing a thing called Advent Word, and every day of Advent, it's a different word, and I have to find a picture and a little 2 or 3 sentence meditation, today's offering. And so I was thinking, how can I go into the church and take a picture that does offering? Yesterday was hard. Yesterday was everlasting, and I couldn't find anyone, so I finally found one last night before I went to bed. But even that silly component of our life, how do we make that intentional? And how do we give God glory? So self-emptying, but part of that is me getting rid of a lot of junk in my life, both actions but also stuff. Also fasting. How often do I fast? Jesus says when you fast, not if you fast. And how do you incorporate fasting into your daily life or monthly life? Personal prayer, and that goes back to your daily office. How are you doing that daily? Retreat. Jesus got away from the world. Repeatedly throughout the Gospels, it talks about Jesus going away to a quiet place, and they couldn't find him, and he liked it that way. How often do I intentionally, and I use that word, I'm going to use that word repeatedly today, go away to be alone with God? It's about solitude, not loneliness. Solitude is very different from loneliness. Loneliness is feeling like you're alone. Solitude is making it so that you are alone and choosing that. I'm an extrovert. Now that we've started Sunday morning church services again, I was dying. COVID was killing me. Not the disease, but the ramifications of the disease. I like to be around people. I get my energy from people. My wife's the exact opposite. My idea of fun is going around to the Christmas market down here that we had in town and seeing 1,000 people and just sucking all the energy off of them. That's, my wife was like, this is so draining. That's how I charge my battery, and that's how it depletes her battery. We're all made differently, and know that about yourself. What do you need to do to charge your batteries? And for me, to retreat means I have to be even more intentional about it, because that's not the way I'm normally wired. I think back, one of the things I used to do was I directed this wonderful drama ministry out of the seminary, and we would tour all up and down the East Coast doing plays that I wrote and directed, and actually was in a few of them, and it was a lot of fun. But to do that, I had to do weeks of solitary work. And I'm wired in such a way that I would always keep the end game in sight. And it was worth the weeks of being alone, writing at my computer or designing the costumes or designing the scripts and the sets and the props, so that when we would do those performances, that would be, wow, that was worth it, you know? And once again, intentionality. I can do this this isn't my strength, so that I can have a payoff to get the reward I want. And that's what all this is about. So retreat, and then you're gonna see these three here, and this is what they call learn on the way of love, but study and work and obedience. These are the three core vows of the Franciscans. Simplicity is part of that. That's the way we do study and work and obedience. Keep it simple, sweetheart, however you want to look at it. But study and work and obedience are the three promises we make. And if you ever see a Franciscan who's in the brown robe, which is what they normally are, you'll see 3 knots on their belt, their rope belt, and that's what the 3 knots are for, the study and the work and obedience. Or no, sorry, correct that. Poverty, chastity, and obedience. But like I said, poverty would be that simplicity, yeah. But the way that we do those is through study, work, and obedience. Sorry, I haven't taken my vows yet. I haven't had my final exams. I can thank you for letting me correct myself. So yeah, poverty, chastity, obedience are the 3 knots. Simplicity, what do you need to get by? You know, I stopped buying disposable pens. You know, and now you'll often see them on my shirt, my little fountain pens that I can refill. You know, yes, my pens are $16, but I only have, I have a black one and I have a red one. So that, I am trying to be very simple in the way I do things. The other part of simplicity is learning, especially in our society. Think of how many things in our lives are disposable for convenience. That's an entirely different way of living. How many of the electronics do you buy have a planned obsolescence of 5 or 6 years? Your computers are designed that way. Our cell phones are designed that way. Our TVs are designed that way. Our microwave ovens are designed that way. Our vacuum cleaners are designed that way. Remember when you would buy a vacuum cleaner and it would last 25 years? A refrigerator and it would last 25 years? How many, 10 years later, you're like, I have to buy a new refrigerator. I just bought one. It has all the bells and whistles, but sometimes you just want a refrigerator that keeps things cold. I don't need it to talk to the store. Yeah. And so simplicity is not about buying cheap stuff. Simplicity is about buying the stuff you need, and only the stuff you need. And then work. And this is different from our vocation, what we get paid for. My work that I have, I put in my rule of life that I do for the Franciscan order is my work with the Triangle of Hope. This relationship between Ghana and Liverpool and the Diocese of Virginia. And I don't get paid for that. I do it for free. I do it out of love. And that's the difference between my Franciscan commitment to work and what y'all pay me to do the rest of the time. Does that make sense? And so this is something I choose to give up as a gift, an offering to God, and to make the world a better place. And then lastly, obedience. And obedience is just doing the stuff you need to do. I used to have a supervisor that said, this is what pays the bills. It isn't fun necessarily, it isn't sexy, but it's the stuff you just got to do. And I just didn't have room on my piece of paper. I'll go into more detail on my details next week. I was just doing the broad categories today. But under obedience, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different things. And these all go back to, we're telling you to do it, are you gonna do it? So my first one under obedience is pray the daily office. Now that would come under personal prayer also, but I'm committing to do the daily office. That's required of all Franciscans. Do community obedience daily and the principles and the intercessions. So there is a daily reading. It's not even a paragraph, it's like 2 or 3 sentences, reminding me of all the parts of being a Franciscan. And I promise to read the first one on the day 1 on the first day of the month, day 2 on the second day of the month, and I do that every month and work through it. I needed to be better about that. I even added it to my calendar on my phone so that every morning it would prompt up to remind me. Now once again, I had to do the work to be intentional so that it would pop up every morning. That was not something I could do, but it is something I added. Monthly meeting with my spiritual director is part of my obedience. They tell you to have a spiritual director, now I look forward to it. Give yearly to the Franciscan order. So in January, I write a check, and that's my yearly gift. Report bi-monthly to formation counselor, and so I'm getting ready to contact him, so we have our December check-in, which will be my last time, and that'll be my last time for as a novice in the order. Once I take my life vows, I won't have to do the monthly check-in, but right now I do. Attend meetings of the local fellowship monthly. We tend to have them monthly, and like I said, our fellowship stretches all the way from Hampton Roads to Charlottesville, to Fredericksburg, and it just so happens that Richmond's central to that. When they started meeting in Richmond, they're like, "Rock, can we meet at St. James the Less?" I'm like, "Of course." You know, makes it easy for me. I don't have to drive from Williamsburg to Ashland, like some folks have chosen to do. I just have to unlock the door, but you know, it does give us a nice meeting space in the library on Saturday mornings. If you're ever in the Altar Guild and you're wondering who's Rock hanging out with, that's my Franciscan buddies. And then oh, sorry, I have the contribute pledge and contribute annually. So I only have 7 on these. And then lastly, comply with the Franciscan Constitution and provincial statutes. So follow all the rules, and I commit to doing that. So like I said, I'll be sharing more details about all of this, but now I want you to have an opportunity, think about what are the things that you want to commit to. You know, look at all these different lists, and what are the areas that you want to zero in on, focus in on, as you write your rule of life? What are some things that you think you should have in there? I would beg you to have at least the 7 that are in the way of love. I think that's a great starting point if you've never written them. If you want to break down the way of love to, like if you wanted to say, I promise to worship weekly, you know, and make sure I go to church every week. Doesn't even have to be here. But, you know, how are you going to do that? I promise, you know, maybe you can commit to, you know, I don't know. I don't want to say anything because I don't want to make put ideas in your head that you are being led by God to do. But how can you choose to be intentional about these things? I think it's really important to have things like simplicity. And I want you to think of it this way. When you lean back in a chair, you want to find that sweet spot where you have to work at it, but you don't want to feel like you're falling back and you're going to smash your head. You know, you have to find that balance where you're challenged, but you're not overwhelmed. You know, or it's not something you're going to, you know, I commit to getting out of bed every morning. If that's the level you're at, then that's a different conversation, right? But we're here to challenge ourselves and to find that sweet spot where we, you know, take some core strength and some work to balance that in our lives. And as we find that place where we are challenged to grow. So put some things in there that are a stretch. And, you know, I redo my rule of life yearly. I noticed, one of the things I had in here was, I talked about getting rid of single-use items in my simplicity. And I'll admit, I have a hard time, like I go to Panera a lot. They have unlimited coffee. So rather than going to Starbucks, I have intentionally chosen to go to Panera because it is a way for me to spend a lot less money. I like good coffee. I like Starbucks, I prefer it because it's stronger and it makes you addicted. And so stepping back to Panera, it was important for me because I needed I didn't need that much caffeine in my life. And so I had to be intentional. And you know, those sleeves, talk about a waste. The sleeves to keep from burning your hand, so I got a permanent sleeve. And I wasn't planning to use that as an example, but it was here in my hand. And so, you know, rather than wasting that every day, I got one and I keep it. I keep it in my bag, you know? And I don't throw that away every day. I'm still working on the plastic lid. I need to start using those more than once. I haven't gotten to that point yet. But, you know, baby steps. Maybe that's my next thing. I'll only get one of those a week. I'll keep it with the sleeve. What are some big categories you're thinking about putting in your rule of life?
My big thing is I want a special, and it doesn't have to be, but I would like a special place where I, either in our house or, depending on where I am, because if I'm like at the river, then outside is beautiful, or if it's cold, you can. To do my daily prayers, and I have found the best time for me is in the morning and Johnny's still in bed. I
Uh-huh.
just, even though he doesn't interrupt me, I just like nothing going on but me and whatever I'm doing with that.
That's awesome.
And I don't do it every morning because of that, and I need, because if I'm sleeping.
Right.
And then I wake up, time to go, you know, gotta rush. But that's one of my goals.
And having a prayer desk or an altar in your home. In fact, during COVID, we did some how to do self-directed worship pamphlet. And then there's some still outside the door right here. And one of the things it talked about was setting up a home altar so that you could have that space that is intentional. And when you go there, you feel different.
Yeah. I do have one chair
Yeah,
that I really like, and right now we had to move it because of the Christmas tree, but it's still in the house, with a table and a box on top that I keep the stuff in, that a dear friend of mine made, both of them, so that's a special, and it's in an area with pictures of people that mean a lot,
yeah.
and symbols that mean a lot, so that's what I'm trying to do. I like the retreat part on yours that you talked about. Last summer, we went to Minnesota to visit our son Andy, and they took us to St. Benedictine's College, or university, whatever it's actually called, school. And we went hiking to the top of a hill over a lake with a chapel that was gorgeous on the outside. And you go inside and it's empty except for one chair and a statue of Mary
Mm.
and writing on the wall from people. But you can, that's a shame, but it was gorgeous, and they all wanted to go look at the water and sit, and I just couldn't get enough of the outside more than the inside. It was such a special place.
Right.
I would love a place like that right here.
Mhm.
I know I have it right here, but it was really,
And that's one of the things that I was going for when we built the labyrinth
yes,
with the bench, with the cross.
yes.
So that was always open. I've heard from some other ministers in town that they'd run away over here.
Ah,
And that's one of the things that they use, and I was just like, that's so special. I love that.
yeah,
Because they knew that nobody at their church was gonna find them here.
yeah.
And
I have been over there, yeah.
they could hide out in our labyrinth, and I said, well, that's why we did it down in a tucked away little nook that nobody sees, and
Yeah.
you can be still and quiet. When we were, especially during COVID, when we were filming so many of our services, a lot of times I would film down there, just because it made me feel even more special. Yeah, finding those places. I want to bring up this book, I hadn't planned on bringing this up, but Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. It's probably 40 years old now. I read it in college. No, geez. So it's probably 45 years old now. But Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. And in that book, he talked about how he had a special chair, and then he would get his cup of coffee, and that's how he did his prayer time every morning. Those, and once again, those rituals, you know, when I do my daily office in the morning, that coffee is part of it. Now, once again, that's just because I don't function well. I'm not a morning person, but that's why I make sure I do my daily office in the morning, because that's when I'm at my weakest. And if I put it off until I'm at my best, I'm gonna be so tied up in the day that I don't do it. When we talked about the sharpshooter versus targeted goals, another thing is knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses. And 80% of your work should be in the areas that you do well. 20% of your work should be where you don't do well. And this is where you challenge yourself. Now, once again, most of the time when I was younger, I would do 80% of my work on the 20%, and then I would beat myself up. And I'm like, and then finally someone said, don't do that. Play your strengths. Do that. But then, like my old boss said, you know, there's some stuff you just gotta do because that's what pays the bills. You know, you gotta write the checks and put them in the mail. You gotta pay the bills. And spend 20% of your time doing that. And usually do that first, so you can reward yourself with what you do well. I'm not a morning person, so in the morning, that's when I do the stuff that I just gotta get done. I gotta respond to emails, I've gotta do my daily office, and that's when I read. I love reading. So I do all the stuff that it's gotta get done, and then I reward myself with something I like to do. And yeah, reading a fantastic book right now. It came out last week. We're gonna do it in book club, but I need some more time. I wanna have it in paperback before we order it. But Renee Brown's Atlas of the Heart just came out on November 30th, and this is her masterwork. I've mentioned Renee Brown a lot, but I'm reading that right now, and I cannot get enough of it. But I do want to wait until it comes out in paperback so that people can, it's more affordable for folks if they want to, but the hardcover is gorgeous. The art and stuff inside of it is just fantastic. If you want to give yourself a good Christmas present, Renee Brown's Atlas of the Heart just came out. So yeah, maybe in your rule of life, do this 80-20 thing. 8% of things you like to do and look forward to it. Have 20% of it be.
I know what my 20% is. There's things you have to do, the structured stuff, you know, not. My 80% is in all the rest. Because it is, you know, to sit down and do something that has to be done. Like you said, when I worked, I didn't like to do office work. I liked to be with the people and, you know, doing stuff like that. So I made myself get in there, get in early, do my office work, get it over with, so I could spend the rest of the day doing other stuff. But
Right.
Yeah.
There was a little saying that, teaching is, remember, Grandma's rule, eat your vegetables first, and that's what, because, not to say people don't like vegetables now, but, you know, it's like, instead of having dessert first, eat your vegetables first, and then do the things you don't wanna do first. And I try to do that.
Yeah.
And it does help, you know, like everybody knows, it helps to get those things done that you don't wanna do. Like cleaning the bathrooms, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Something they say you don't wanna do it, but, you know,
I can put it off.
better days than others of that, same thing with eating.
Yeah, these are all great examples. Any questions on this?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I'm
Turn means, well, remember so last week we talked about conversion is the fancy word for it. And the metaphor I used last week was a soundboard. And that's what your husband does, you know. First you gotta turn it on. And so conversion is, am I choosing to do this or not? You guys came to a Rule of Life class. I have already considered yourself turned. But we also talked about that on a daily basis. Am I going to follow Jesus today or not? And I try to make that the first thing I decide to do when I get out of bed.
I think there are big turns and then smaller turns.
And that's why I use the soundboard analogy. Yeah, there's a turning on of the soundboard.
Right.
And then you've got all, like a gazillion little knobs you need to tinker
Little
with.
things that you still need to turn, you know.
And because you're in this class, you've already probably done the big one. And that this class is talking about how do we tinker with all those knobs to get the balance that we are supposed to have, that we're seeking, where we're challenged or we're not distressed. Yeah. Does that make sense, Kathy?
Yes, it does.
And to me, a lot of the smaller turns that you need, or that I feel like I've made or need to make in my life, are once you look at something from another person's perspective, or hear another person speak their perspective from a topic maybe you've got strong feelings about, that's where I start to turn. I'm like, whoa, I didn't think it was any way but my way, or the way I thought. Wow, what you said just made a whole lot of sense, and now I think I can change the way I feel. That's happened, you know, I love it when that happens.
Right. Well, a lot of that we can only, what we can envision, we can do.
Right.
And because you never thought of it from that perspective, you never thought of it, seeing it that way, you never saw that as an option.
I'm gonna use the monuments as an example.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Virginia. I didn't grow up in Richmond, but Richmond was a mighty special place. When we got to come, it was a special day. And of course, we would go down Monument Avenue and we all just look at the monuments, and there's this one and that one and the other one and the other one. So when the conversation came up about them coming down, I was turned off, actually. Not turned on, turned off. I'm like, wow, saw those things all my life. Right. And then I started, a person I really respected, they had taken one down in Fredericksburg. And a person I really respected grew up in Fredericksburg. He played on the UVA basketball team. I liked him a lot. And he said, wow, that thing is down. I am so glad. I had to walk past that thing every morning on my way to the school bus, and it was horrible. I just thought about it every single morning going to school. I'm like, wow.
Right.
I didn't know that. I never thought about it like that, you know, so.
Imagine going to Lee Davis High School. If
Exactly.
You're
So then I started thinking, how can they not change? You know, that was my turn on the whole thing. And I'm real glad that, you know, it happened when it did, because that's how, you know, I dealt with all of it. And I said, it's not just you that walks this earth. You know, you are with millions of other people, and things that affect you one way affect them way differently than you. And anyway, I got it. In that moment, I got it, and I said, wow, that's how the people here in Richmond feel as well, that have to walk past them to get to their bus or their destination. And yeah, maybe it is time. So that was how I did my turn, and it took someone that I just enjoyed watching on TV playing, you know, his sport, and I related to it, and I'm so thankful I did.
That's a great story, Nancy. Thank you. And that's a great example.
Yeah.
We are called to daily convert. I grew up Baptist, and there was a phrase that I was taught as a child: once saved, always saved. Once we turn that switch on, it's done.
Good to go.
And one of my favorite authors, I mentioned this book, I think, last week, The Divine Conspiracy by Dallas Willard. Best book on discipleship I've ever read. Oh, sorry, I'll write that down. He talks about how too often we think of when we become a Christian, that we get our barcode, and then we're gonna get to the pearly gates, and St. Peter's gonna go, boop, come on in, just like at a concert. They scan the ticket, come on in, boop, boop. And he said, becoming a Christian is not about a barcode. We don't get a barcode. It's this daily choice in this old Shaker hymn, by turning, we come round right.
Mm-hmm.
'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to go up where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the land of love and delight. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff.
We were playing that on bells before we had to start doing Christmas music. So maybe we'll get to do that song singing. I
The
love
Dallas Willard's book, he was a philosophy professor at the University of Southern California. And it won Book of the Year, I think, in '99. The horrible, horrible title. Because I hate conspiracy theories, but it's called The Divine Conspiracy, and that comes from Jesus' teaching about the kingdom of God. And he said the kingdom of God imagery that Jesus tossed out was God's plan to take over the world, one heart at a time. And that's the divine conspiracy. And I was like, conspiracy just has too much baggage for me. The Reign of the Kingdom of God would have been a much better book, or title for what it does. But he talks about, and what he does is he slowly works his way through the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus used. And I know I've used this in a sermon. Maybe I said it last week. Sorry, I don't remember. But at the very beginning of the book, he talks about how his family sat around the coffee table or dinner table on the family farm, and they had the uncles and everybody, and they had to decide whether they were going to bring electricity into their house with the Tennessee Valley Authority. And one of the uncles said, if we do this, it'll change everything. And Dallas says, looking back, I'm like, of course it will, thank God. But going into it, we have that fear and trepidation around the unknown. And he said, yes, my uncle was entirely right. It did change everything, but it's all the changes that needed to take place. And that's what we're talking about with all of these different approaches to this rule of life. How is God calling you to be who God made you to be? And what are the concrete steps to targeted shotgun goals? Not shotgun. Shotgun. Anyways. Bullseye, thank you, whatever. These sharpshooter, thank you, that's the word I'm looking for. These sharpshooter goals. What are those things that you can commit to do? And Sally, at your little chair, we've got a laminator. Print off your rule of life, laminate it, set it on that chair. On those daily readings that I have to do, those little sentences, like I said, I put it in my phone, so it comes up on my calendar. But I also have a laminated sheet that I keep with my computer. If I haven't read it on my phone, I make sure when I pull my laptop out, that I pull that sheet out first and read that day. And then put it back in the bag, so it's always with me. And I keep that with me at all times.
I put the little wooden coin thing you gave us in my car, so I'll see it, because I'm in my car every day.
Yeah.
As a reminder. And I was thinking, the way of love, all the points are interconnected
Yes.
and separate. And I look at all of them as a turn, if you're practicing it. That's the right interpretation.
Choosing to take a Sabbath is the biggest smack in the face of our culture that you could do. To be still and quiet for a day, in a world that says, be busy, be busy, be busy. Fear that you're not gonna have enough. Fear that you're not gonna be keeping up with the Joneses. Fear, fear, fear. You know, the first words out of every angel's mouth is fear not.
Especially now, this season, as far as trying to shop and wrap and decorate and Christmas cards and.
Yeah, consume, consume,
Yeah.
consume.
Consume.
Yeah, that, I mean, we can't get more countercultural than this. Simplicity and rest. This is terrifying to the powers that be. The devil's whispering in your ears, consume, 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 fear, fear, fear. Yeah.
Well, and two, you need to listen. Because I don't know if I can get through this or not, but, you know, the last 5 years or so for me has been a little tumultuous. And I've always had my dog, you know, I love my little dog. And, you know, and I really tried to, you know, trust and say, okay, God, you know, deal with it for me or whatever, you know, be there for me. And then I had to put my dog down in June. And suddenly I was just by myself, you know, and I was like, really, God? I mean, seriously? Are you gonna take my dog? And I was really, really angry and upset and, you know, I mean, first I was upset and then I was angry. And this is gonna sound really crazy. You believe in God weeks, right? We've talked about that. There's no such thing as coincidence.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, that's what.
I just don't call them that, but yeah. I mean,
Right. So anyway, so I was driving down the road, being my angry self, and you know, when you push the scan, and so you have to listen to a little bit of each. Well, somehow I got a hold of this revivalist preacher person who said that he was going through a hard time, and so what he said was, "What have I done? What have I done, God? I've pissed you off," and you know, and that for me was like a turn. It was like, oh, okay. So this is what you want me to do, is to, because I'm not trusting, and I said that I always would trust, and so this is what I need to work on. And it was just like an amazing feeling. I mean, everything just was lifted. And the end of this, I mean, this is a very long story. So I'm just gonna shorten it, but, you know, so this has been like a couple of weeks, I guess, you know, that I've just really felt a huge transformation, and, because the other part of it was like, okay, what are you gonna do for me? That was the big part of the whole big thing, you know, is I'm an introvert. I mean, the pandemic bothered me not a bit. But I had my dog, you know, and so I was like, you know, I don't know what to do. Should I get another one? You know, God, tell me what to do. And, you know, God, I believe God answers prayers, yes, no, or not now. And so it was clearly a not now. And, but then after this, it just sort of, I don't know, things just changed. And lo and behold, yesterday, I got a call from a woman who has a 3-year-old corgi that she really, you know, she had, I don't know, it's a long story, she had 4 and now she's downsizing or whatever. It's just exactly perfect for me. So, I don't know, you have to listen, you have to, and that's what I forget to do. I forget to, you know, I need, you know, God, okay, God, I need this, and I need this, and I need this, you know, and then you don't listen to what he's trying to tell you. So, anyway, I hope the dog works out.
That sounds great.
That would be a wonderful thing, but yeah, you have to be careful. I've learned, you've got to be careful of your temper. You've got to, you know, you've got to trust. You've got to trust.
That's a big one right there, trust.
It's
A
hard.
huge one.
It's hard. It really is, especially when things are going bad. You're
Yeah.
just going, you know, what is this about?
My
But,
cousin
you know,
used to say when things were down or bad, to lay it at his feet,
mhm.
but you can't pick it back up.
Right, I know, exactly, and I love to do that. Give it back to me.
Yeah.
me worry about it and be angry about it a little while longer.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. God works, but you have to look.
Yeah. God grant me patience, but hurry. Or that old hymn, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Yeah. Well, good. Well, now let's look at homework. So we're gonna gather next week, and I'd like you to have done at least a rough draft on your, rule of life. Work on it this week. Think about what are the categories you want to do, and then how can I turn those into sharpshooter goals for what I plan to do for the next year. And if you want to type it up, and like I said, we got a laminator, we're happy to laminate those for you. We'll share as much as you're comfortable sharing. I'll share, I'm gonna work on mine and revamp mine for next year. There's some stuff on here I definitely didn't do. I challenged myself too much, or it was in that 20% that, yeah, that was dumb, Jeff. Don't do that. What's gonna be included? So wrestle with that in a good way, challenge yourself, and we'll work on it together. And one of the things that I know I always find it easier when I'm working with somebody. It's hard for us to see shotgun goals sometimes, and they help me transform them into sharpshooter goals. How can I make this quantifiable? Am I doing it or not? Is it a yes or a no? Is it 3 or 20 or what? The other thing that is very helpful is just finding ways to encourage it. And one of the things we do in the Franciscans every year is we bring our rule of life on St. Francis Day, and we bless them for the next year. And so we'll do a time of prayer and blessing over your rules of life, even if they're works in progress, for the ones that you brought and also the ones that you hope to finalize. Like I said, this is much better than doing New Year's resolutions. Yep. Oh, sorry, I went over. Did it again. Thank you, guys.
All right.